To another acquittal.
Yeah, so we started off the last episode talking about wrongful accusations, and we were on the cusp of another one and got an acquittal. That means not guilty, and that's fantastic. Somebody who was wrongly accused was acquitted.
Well, we were talking specifically about university cases, which the one that we want to talk about now is one of those.
I know, but this was like a young kid, not university, but like another completely BS, if I can say that.
Oh, you're talking about our recent
Our
success.
recent
I'm already
win.
thinking about this one.
I know,
It was such
but
a wild
like
case.
just
Yeah, that
thank
was
God
awesome.
we saved
Very
some kid's life,
awesome.
which was great, and we're so happy. So let's take a drink to that.
Yeah, the ones with the young kids are always so important.
Well, it's emotional, right? It could be, I'm not a young pup. I look at these people like they could be my children, and this was completely bullshit, if I can say that, and it was palpably false, and thank God, we were able to marshal it the way we did and get an acquittal for this young man, and justice was served, and he was believed by the judge.
Well, the thing that really got me was he came so close to like perfectly, the closest I've ever seen to perfectly following the affirmative consent model. And yet he still got charged. And it was just like,
Yeah.
it's like, what are you supposed to do nowadays? It's crazy, but...
Right. So, this leads us into the discussion about what we're going to continue to talk about, like an anatomy of a false accusation, is that even in circumstances where you are in a natural, sort of engagement and relationship with an individual, you can be charged with something just simply...
You can do everything right.
Yeah.
And then, because something happens that's embarrassing to the person, that's a big motive that I've seen a lot, is embarrassment. But for whatever reason...
But expand on that a bit, because we'll talk about this in a moment. But you raised a really good point when we were sort of going over this about, how embarrassment is somehow a motivation to make an allegation. And it's like, to me, it was like, I don't understand that, but you're right.
More and more so.
Yeah.
And I really think that they need to study it a lot closer because it's such a powerful emotion where and I've looked this up too, where a lot of people have this phenomenon where you're just sitting there doing whatever, something triggers a memory, you get an embarrassing memory, and then people have this kind of like, have to shake it out of their head or whatever. It's like a lot of people have this happen where they just randomly get these like unwanted, embarrassing thoughts. Cringe moments. There was an article written about it called Cringe Moments.
Right.
So if you think about, that's enough people have that happen, that there's an article about it, just, I don't know if it was Psychology Today or just like a random opinion piece or something like that, it's such a strong emotion shared, so common for people that it should be studied more closely. And
Yes.
so when you think about it that way, and how easy it is to become embarrassed when you're engaged in sexual activity, because
Right.
all kinds of things can happen, right? Yeah. And
That's so right.
I know. So it's I
Even
see
when
it
unexpected.
so often. I see it so that's the motive that I've seen probably most commonly with the cases of young kids, especially. So the whole thing is, especially at a university environment, if you kind of get out of hand or whatever, and then you're worried about what people are going to hear about you, one of the ways they can get ahead of the gossip is to say, oh, well, it wasn't my fault because I was assaulted,
And I was drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us into this discussion of another wrongful accusation, which is really serious, and it could have ruined a really, really nice young man's life. Again, super student.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say what program he was in or
Mild-mannered.
university. Mild-mannered, polite. Like, you'd love to have him come to dinner at your dinner table. Really nice, super grades, great career in his future. And like what happens every weekend on a campus at a university, there's a party, there's drinking, there's beer pong. What's that other stuff they were doing? Like the...
Oh, there was just different types of drinking games with the same...
Yeah.
Like... The way you stack them changes the name of it. It was like Stack Cup.
Stack Cup or whatever.
I don't know.
I can't even remember.
You have to go to university to get an education on drinking games.
I'm too old for that. But the reality is, at the next day, after there was, in our opinion, consensual intimate contact, he gets fucking charged. it's shocking. So
well, there's so many interesting aspects about it. So
let's break it down. But this is really something, again, serious, because we have to emphasize this. This was a young man charged with a false accusation of sexual assault. False. And it starts with somebody who got embarrassed after a night of fun and drinking and getting loose and being attracted to our client and just letting go. And the next day and the day after, and talking with friends, it turned into something else, which is somehow has a psychological component to it. But it starts with certain training at universities. You know what I'm getting at? Yeah. Consent training, right? What's consent in a sexual... Explain more what goes on with universities and this consent orientation training.
Well, we have an article on the website about this, mentioning one of these courses too. You look it up, they're miseducating students about the level of intoxication that would result in an incapacity finding.
But let's explain it for people so they understand it in the basics. Go ahead.
So you have to go to courses at the beginning so all the young men at the university learn how to not rape.
And women.
Basically.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's more of a warning for young women. I don't think that they actually take it seriously that women are likely to engage in perpetrating.
No, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I mean, that's the way they like to talk about it in general. It's just like, and we understand that men can be victims. So, but they're usually victims of other men. That's the way they finish that off, right? These activists who organize all of this training. So yeah, everybody has to go and take these courses. And in this case, I think the kid was actually part of the committee that was involved in doing all that and everything, right? So yeah, like again, like the other guy is like, he understands affirmative consent. He's very careful about it. And yet he still ends up charged. But the activists ended up playing a big role in how this all went down, because they all just kind of rushed to this girl's side and told her how to go about dealing with what had happened to her, and maybe convinced her that what happened to her actually was an assault.
Right. So let's go back for a second, because we're trying to break down here, for at least the last episode and this episode, the anatomy of a wrongful accusation or charge. And so at a university setting, there is orientation training about consent in sex. And essentially what they interpret it as, if a person drinks and becomes intoxicated, you can't consent.
Right. And they don't say like how drunk they are, but I mean, the general idea is you get a get out of embarrassment free card if you've had 2 drinks.
Right, but this is really crucial for everybody to understand and be terrified about, okay? Because we all have children who go to university, and if you have younger children who are going to university, this is the training. If somebody is drinking, they are not able to consent. So the concept...
If they're female.
Female. Right. Correct. So the concept is consuming alcohol means you are not capable of consenting, which is crazy.
Buzzkill.
Totally.
Cock blocking.
That's going to get bleeped. Thank God you're bleeped and I'm not. But the reality is, we need to just pause and think about this. So, like, if you're drinking at a party and you meet up with someone and you're having fun and you're kissing and you go back to somebody's house and you have more kissing and you engage in intercourse and other stuff, you can be guilty of sexual assault because the female party had alcohol. Doesn't mean they lack the capacity, but the definition, according to the training that you get at these universities, is that if you're drinking, you're not capable of consenting. And that and they can defend themselves every which way from Sunday, and it's bullshit. But that's what they're conveying. But that translates into a charge. Because in this case that we had, the person in cross-examination to me said, well, I was drinking. I was not capable of consenting. So they gave the agency of their own consent. You used a great terminology for this.
There was a language barrier.
No, but even better.
In that case,
they conferred their agency to somebody else. That if I'm drinking, I no longer have any responsibility for my own actions. So I think we need to reframe
this is why I really, have trouble with this idea of feminism, because feminists fought very hard for women to have the right to take risks and to live their life more fully, and and then this whole idea now is like treating them like children who can't be trusted with making decisions for themselves, and I just don't see it as feminist at all. But one of the interesting things is that the drunker a woman becomes, usually the guy's getting drunk at the same time, but they become more responsible not only for their own decision making, but for her decision making. They're supposed to start making decisions for her, right? And so that's an issue where, based on gender, two people getting equally drunk, one becomes less responsible for their own actions, and the other one becomes doubly responsible.
That's right, the male. So let's break this down so everybody understands. What camera am I looking at? Okay, so we have a young man. He's 21.
It was like you were talking to God for a moment.
Let's not debate that. So 21, 22? He was 21?
21, I think, at the time, yeah.
Okay, and so he knows this person who's a female. They have friends in common. They're connected. They talk. Hey, come over for a house party, which happens at university all the time. They come over. Everybody's
they even
along.
had pre-drinking, right?
They pre-drink on their own. They get together.
It's so common they just call it a pre. So we're going there for a pre.
Yeah. And I think I pre'd prior to the podcast. But anyways, so honey, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway, so they go to this party. They're all hanging out at the house. They're having a good time.
And they planned on going out to a bar after, this was just a pre-drinking.
They're going to go out to a bar. They're pre-drinking, but they're playing beer pong, and there's the death cup, which somebody can email me after reading this and
people
explain
have to keep putting their booze in when they lose or something like that, and then it becomes a big mixture of everybody's booze that's really disgusting.
But so they're all willingly, voluntarily engaging in this, and they're having fun. And then our client, nice guy, is with this young lady who is interested in him, and they
apparently not, though.
Well, she said she wasn't, but the objective evidence from other witnesses, many other witnesses, were she was very interested in him. They're kissing, like a lot of kissing. She's all over him.
Throughout the entire hour and a half or whatever at the house party. But there's an interesting point.
Taking him into a bedroom and making out with him.
Yeah.
That's objective evidence. It's not our twist as lawyers or anything else. That was objective evidence. She was very interested in him, kissing him, brought him into a bedroom, and continued to engage in intimate contact. Okay? And they'd been drinking.
Kept grabbing him by the shirt and pulling him into another room to keep making out.
Did you hear that? Grabbing him. What? Say it again loud. Say it loud. You're not loud enough.
Not as loud as you. Kept grabbing him by the shirt and pulling him into another empty bedroom to try and make out with him. And
say that again.
They were kissing against the door. Again.
What was that piece of evidence? What was that piece of evidence?
Well, there weren't that many witnesses. What we do know was witnessed was that
we know that from two witnesses.
They were knocking on a door for a couple that went into a bedroom to do whatever they were doing, and so they were knocking on the door saying, "Hey, let's go, let's go." And then when the door opened up, they both fell into the room, right? And that was an interesting bit of evidence too, because what they were actually doing was whispering and leaning on the door, and that's where they first had their first kiss. And then the door opened up, and they were both leaning on it, so they fell into the room and started laughing.
Right, but we had pretty clear evidence that she had been kissing him, they were mutually engaged. He was very interested too. They were engaged. They were kissing. They went into a bedroom. They were on the bed. They were kissing. They were touching each other. This was objective evidence from parties that gave very clear evidence about this, right? So this is what's going on at the house party when people are drinking and they're having fun and they're 20 years of age, 21, 22, whatever, right?
Yeah.
What happens
basically
next?
A regular party.
Right, so, human relations.
So they decide that ultimately they're not going to go out to a club. And so they're like, oh, okay, and they're hanging out on the porch, and a couple of them are smokers and stuff. She's out there with them. Everybody's chatting. And then they say, okay, well, we're going to head out. And and there's a round of goodbyes. So, remember, this is a person who's going to be claiming that he was way too intoxicated to be giving consent, she makes sure she remembers the etiquette to go back in and say to everybody, all right, see you later, and does the little rounds. And she's talking and walking perfectly fine, navigates the steps down the porch. And
Talks
the
to
two
people,
of them,
says goodbye.
Two of them saunter
Leaves
off
with our
into
client.
the dusk.
Right. And then, so what's important in this case is, and why I'm so insane about it is, there was a friend of our client who was part of this committee about consent training, who totally
Was
tainted
best
and
friends
twisted.
with our guy at the
Best
time.
friends with our guy, and went in. What was the scapegoat in the U.S.?
The scapegoat?
Yeah, the guy, the turncoat.
Oh, there's so many.
Anyways,
I have
forget
no
it.
idea what you're talking
So
about.
just sort of like went
I said the
totally
backstabbing-
sideways,
the backstabbing
you know, at tout brute, like totally went and convinced to a large extent, and had a very significant influence. So before charges were laid, this complainant, after she woke up after the day after of consensual intercourse with her client, started to think about the evening after she sobered up and started to talk to people, including our client's friend. And our client's friend said, oh, you were drinking. You couldn't have consented. You were drinking. You were drunk. And that, along with other influence from other people, turned into a sex assault. And I want to make this very clear. That's bullshit. But that's what happened in our case.
There was another bit of a motive that's similar, but a little bit different, and that our guy had been dating one of her flatmates.
Good point.
And
right,
so
there was a prior history.
There was like an etiquette thing for her there too, that, you know, it's sort of like he's a no-go zone, like not allowed to, you know, I'm not sure if you're supposed to wait a certain amount of time or whatever, but he was off limits because her roommate was still, you know, upset about the breakup or whatever. It hadn't been that long. So, yeah, I think that was one of the big things too, is that she knew she was going to get in trouble.
Right. So again, let's back up because people may not follow this completely. Is that the complainant lived with a prior girlfriend of her client. They had a relationship. They broke up. Some period of time passed. The complainant then got invited to a party with our client.
And I think legitimately they didn't intend on hooking up that night.
They did. Neither party intended to have hookup or relationship, but they wanted to go together to this party. And part of the evidence later on, as you noted, was, well, he's off limits because he was with my roommate.
This is a really important aspect of what happens when people claim to have blackout, though, because they can't testify about what they did or didn't do. They have no memory. They're asked to give propensity evidence or previous existing attitudes. Would you have?
Okay, so hold on one sec. So when she woke up the next day and then spoke to her friends afterward and came to a conclusion that she was sexually assaulted, part of her narrative was, well, I would not have done this but for being drunk, and he was off limits because he was with my friend, and blah, blah, blah. But but what's important to note here is what you said, is what would you have done? Well, I would not have, and let's explain a blackout for a second. A blackout is a memory blackout. It doesn't mean you're passed out. So people can consume alcohol, which many of our viewers may do, like us. We don't.
We just sip it.
We just sip it. It's tea. But the reality is, you can drink enough alcohol, and unfortunately, you're walking, you're talking, you're engaging in activities. You can do math, you can do science, you can do physics, you can look up and find through a thing, you know, exoplanet, but you just don't fucking remember what happened because you had that amount of alcohol that gave you a memory blackout.
And the next morning you're going, I don't even want to look at Twitter.
Right. But you don't remember what happened. It doesn't mean you're passed out. Doesn't mean you're not consciously consenting. It just means you don't fucking remember. There's a difference. Okay, there's a difference. So this person, reconstructed their evidence based upon other people's memories and her own feelings afterward because she regretted what she did.
Yeah. Well, and they used to have to bring expert evidence to establish capacity and stuff like that. Because there's like a bunch of case law that says it's very rare that, without expert evidence that, capacity can be,
Well, they used to call, they get a blood
that's
sample.
That's
but
not
if it's
true
reported
anymore.
several days later, you can't get a blood sample.
Right.
So, it used to be if there was a report within less than 24 hours and somebody went and did a sexual assault kit, they took a blood sample, you could get an alcohol concentration level, and then you can call a toxicologist to what the level is. But that evidence still is not helpful.
But, okay, so there was an interesting thing about blackout that I was reading as well in terms of the science, and that it's your short-term memory that, it was the long-term memory that gets affected, but you have just enough, you can have a coherent conversation and seem like you're totally sober enough to be making decisions. And so one of these articles that I read about advising people how to figure out if somebody's too drunk or not, because of course guys need to know how to do that nowadays, was
my advice now, and your advice should be, if any female you're with that you're not married to is intoxicated, don't do it, dudes.
Yeah. Make sure you visibly call her a cab home and don't get in it with her. But one of the things I say to do is to have a conversation, and then after a couple of minutes, go back to mention something that you talked about. And if they can't remember having talked about it, they're in blackout.
Yeah.
But they can retain memory for long enough that they can actually have a coherent conversation. So
right, but
blackout
we've had this.
It's difficult. It's actually difficult to know if somebody is in that state.
For themselves to know?
No, it's difficult for other people sometimes.
Yeah, because they're acting normally. Mm-hmm. We had in this case evidence, objective evidence of other witnesses about the actions of both people, our client and the complainant, where they are talking, they're joking, they're making conversation, where there is, a point being made, where there is
just following the conversation, totally fine.
Where there's a joke, there's laughter, there's cognitive awareness of what they're doing, but they don't have memory.
Yeah.
So do not equate a blackout with incapacity.
Do you know the most intriguing issue about her memory to me? I like using the word intriguing for, you're a liar. But no, it's so intriguing to me that her memory disappears precisely at the moment where she was visibly, she was witnessed kissing him. She loses her memory about 15 minutes prior to that. For no good reason.
Again.
She even says, I didn't even drink that much, that I don't know why I have no memory. Yeah. But I do remember that I had this text message, and so I have no memory of this text message with my friend. And so I must have lost my memory at that point, 15 minutes prior to when she was making out with him.
The complainant, under cross-examination, could not remember these very important points. Mm-hmm. Yet, there's objective evidence about what was going on. So when she's, for example, making out with our client on the couch, taking him up to a bedroom, going from another bedroom to another bedroom.
Following him around the house.
Following him around the house. Miraculously, she has no memory of that. But she remembers other things that seem to be a violation of her body integrity. Mm-hmm. I apologize to the viewers if you think we're a little disjointed or I'm too upset about this, but this is another example of a wrongful accusation and how people absolutely manipulate their own evidence to fit their own narrative to get somebody convicted. And I don't know why they do that. I don't know why it's so important in this day and age to vilify and convict somebody when you're responsible for your own actions and you don't like it, and the answer has to be a sexual assault on somebody else.
You should be proud to be responsible for your own actions, no matter how embarrassing they are. That's what life's about. You make mistakes, you learn from them, and then you get wiser and better.
Right. So maybe this was not a good decision. Maybe you got drunk, you were capable of consenting, you had sex with somebody you shouldn't have or you didn't want to at that time, but you learned from that. It doesn't mean they're guilty of a sexual assault. It doesn't mean you're going to ruin their lives. It means you take responsibility for your actions and grow from that. You're absolutely right. But that's not the culture we live in now. The culture now is to eradicate somebody else because of your own mistakes. That sucks.
It's not feminism as far as I'm concerned.
It's not. Feminism, to a large extent, was asserting your own autonomy.
I was an annoying feminist when I was 20 years old. Like, I know...
You're not annoying yet? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, in a different way. In a wiser, more mature, annoying way.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's like, I know the whole routine. Like, when I'm talking about this isn't feminism to me, it's like, that's... Like, I'm not just some person who never looked into the issue. You know what I mean?
No.
Yeah.
You're highly educated in this. You're well written. You know, you're exceptionally bright.
To be honest with you,
you're on topic.
Well, you don't need to.
No, but it's true. But that's why we're together doing this business. But the reality is, I always thought feminism was about asserting autonomy, decision-making power. I believe in stuff like equal pay and all this other stuff. Like, there's no distinction between our sexes. Mm-hmm. The reality is, women can do everything men can do, and it's equal. Period. Door shut. Absolutely.
It's not the same. I did construction, and I was a much better cutter than the guys were. I was more precise.
Absolutely, you could be.
I can do, but there were other things I couldn't do very well, right? So, you know, they just like that's the interesting thing with this whole equality issue is like, it's not regular equality the way people just think like you should have opportunities. Now we're dealing with equity. That's what, and I wish they would just call it equity. They want to pretend like there's no difference between the genders, but at the same time they want us to pretend that women are these vulnerable creatures who can't figure out how much they can drink and they can't take responsibility for.
Well, but that's the point.
Their choices.
I maybe was a little imprecise the way I went about this, but there are a lot, like when we talk about equity or equality in many ways, you know, I've never understood the argument that for some reason there's a female who can't earn as much or do as much as a male or achieve this or whatever. Yeah, maybe MMA fighting or whatever, it's not equal. But cognitively, intellectually, and in many respects, there's just no argument here. But the reality is, in this criminal law sphere, we are robbing the female party of the ability to make decisions and then own them. Mm-hmm. Am I wrong here?
Well, I don't know how you can be proud of your accomplishments if you can't own your mistakes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
but then it becomes criminalized. I had a f***ing drink. I couldn't consent. Literally in cross-examination, when I was asking the question about having the ability to agree to sex, because you were smart. You said to me, there's a language barrier, so I stopped asking consent. I said, what about agreeing?
Every time you said consent, it meant something different to her, and so she wouldn't answer your question
because of that
straight.
Consent training at the university. And then, you know, when I said about agreeing, she got stumbled. But still it went back to, well, I had a drink. I was drinking. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely wrong. That's not the law on consent. It's not the law on capacity. And this poor young man suffered, and continues to suffer because of this allegation.
He had to switch universities. He lost a whole year of his schooling.
Had to move universities. Mm-hmm. He was kicked out of that university. Had to go to another university.
He withdrew before they, you know, he didn't want to participate in the investigation. And so
that's being kicked out, right?
Well, I mean, what do they call that when you quit but you were made to quit? It's constructive dismissal.
Yeah, so he was constructively removed from the university, had to go to another university, and still suffered consequences even when acquitted. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I know. Got kicked out of his frat.
This is a sad and true story where this young man was not guilty.
I just like
this young man.
I look so sad when
anybody who's a parent, a mother and father, we would love to have him at our dinner table dating our daughter or our son, a really good kid. And he did nothing wrong other than party on a night with females who equally partied and had fun, but denied their own agency for their own actions and turned it around on him. And it was false, and he was acquitted because that was the right thing. He was not guilty. but he still suffers the consequences of that, and it's wrong. And this is what is going on in our system.
One of the fun moments in that courtroom actually was because we still got to go to a courtroom at that time, pre-pandemic, was when you started questioning her about whether or not blackout was the same as being too drunk to consent or whatever.
Oh my
right?
God, yeah. Just play that out for everybody to understand.
So, like, I can't remember. I mean, it was just
because you're blacked
it's
out.
Such an important point.
I said this because you have a blackout doesn't mean you didn't consent. And then I got a groan from the whole courthouse.
Because all of these activists were on her side of the courtroom, and people do sit on sides, right? And this is another interesting.
Yeah, we're
thing
on the
about
left.
this trial.
They're on the the Crown, the prosecutor, and the complainant's friends and family, and everybody's on the right side. And I asked this question, which is perfectly correct and accurate, and all that right side groaned and basically wanted me to die at that point.
God, there was like a big we actually had to wait.
You lawyer, right?
And well, they didn't actually. There were no words that I recall, but there was like a big groaning, and there was like a mumbling mixture of words and so on. And then, but you said something really funny about. I'm sorry, who am I asking questions to right now? Or something like that.
So when okay, I'm more polite when I'm in a courtroom. But when they did that, I said, "Sorry, Your Honor, I'm not sure. I'm asking questions of the complainant, not the gallery. Could the gallery be quiet?
Peanut gallery.
Could the gallery be quiet?"
So the other cool
what happened
thing,
with the gallery as the trial?
So that's the other cool thing that happened is that once our guys started testifying, people started
and cross-examination went on.
Mm-hmm. People
Don't
started.
rob me of that.
Well, after your brilliant cross-examination, the facts started to become clear. But no, some of the people who testified, they couldn't be in the courtroom until they finished testifying. So, so they didn't observe that part. But so once he started testifying, people who were originally on the right side of the courtroom started switching to the left side of the courtroom.
Right.
And there's an interesting issue.
So that means that people who were originally on the complainant's side moved over to the defendant's side.
And sat
because
on his
as
side
he was testifying, people sort of got the message about the truth.
Mm-hmm. I know, and it's an interesting thing because we have these Zoom trials right now because of the pandemic.
Right.
That's a visual thing that clearly was observable that was going on in the courtroom.
Right.
That I think had to have had an effect.
Right.
Which you wouldn't have the ability to do that. I mean, we've only had one trial right now where where our clients' parents were actually, we made sure that they were visible on camera during.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So we talked about at the beginning of this case where we had a client recently found not guilty of a sexual assault where he was clearly innocent. But when we decided to agree to the Zoom trial, which was fair because of the pandemic, one of our conditions was that the parents of our client would be on camera and on the screen so that, like in a courtroom, they'd be seen.
Yeah, you can see that he has support. You can see the concern for him. You get a sense of who he is, and you remember that this is a human being's life on trial.
Right. We spoke about this a long time ago. We were concerned about Zoom trials and losing
dehumanizing people.
The human element of a trial. Yeah. So this helped us have the human element, and it's important. Yeah. But so in this case, as it went on, and when the accused testified, our client who was not guilty. We started to see people move from one side to our side. Because guess what? He was innocent.
I know. But it was actually a case that garnered some media attention too because of the whole...
There was a lot of media attention on this.
Connection to the university and stuff like that. But and
after the acquittal, I got a lot of hang-up calls and crank calls.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's right.
And people posting
I know. Oh, wow. So interesting. But, and it's unfortunate when there is media attention on a case, especially the really big cases, which, we're going to talk about because we're now taking questions from viewers. So if you want to send a question or give us a topic suggestion, you can send that to notonrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And we're going to...
Should we say that other stuff like, subscribe.
If you're watching this, if you're still watching this,
I'm really not good at that.
You should like, the video. That's the little thumbs up thing. Then you should share it with all your friends. You should subscribe so that you can see when the next one gets posted. And if you're listening on Apple, I think it is, you should leave a review. So we've got all that done. But the question that we're going to talk about, or the subject that we want to talk about today, that was sent to us, is connected kind of to what we were just discussing, because it involves a lot of activism. So we were asked to discuss the recent Court of Appeal decision in the Bill Cosby case.
Bless you, honey. Yeah, so there was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as they call it. So I'm not, neither of us are that imbued with complete knowledge of the U.S. court system, because it's weird to us. But the Pennsylvania
circuits and all this
circuit Supreme whatever
they
court.
They should call them circuses, actually.
Yeah. Overturned the conviction of Bill Cosby for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, okay. So, first of all, I don't really...
And first of all, let's say this to our viewers, because we got a few emails, and this was one of them, to ask us to talk about and explain the Bill Cosby appeal. So this is wonderful. So thank you very much for being so engaged and writing to us, and that email address is available. You know, I'm available by email. You can search me up on the internet. We're happy to answer questions and listen to what you have to say and respond, because we're doing this really for education purposes and to get the message out. So thank you very much for participating.
I know. And when you send suggestions or whatever, you can actually, if you want to have us mention your name, we can do that, or you can give yourself a pseudonym, or just have it be anonymous. In this case, the guy said that he was fine with us saying his name, so we're answering the question of...
well, let's just use the first name.
Okay, it's a guy named, how would you say that, Andreas?
Andreas.
So thanks for your question, Andreas. So yeah, the Cosby appeal is different from the Cosby trial in a way, right? Yeah. And I want to focus the conversation on just the appeal, because the appeal is very important. And the reason I have so many papers in my hand right now is because I started looking up the reaction to this, and the vitriol is just unbelievent in response to this appeal, his successful appeal. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows who Bill Cosby is. Everybody knows that he went through two different trials. There was a mistrial because of a hung jury, and then they had a second trial. And the difference between those two is one of the concerns. But you know, they've got this... The article titled, "Bill Cosby's Release from Prison Was No Win for Black America." And then I've seen other titles of articles saying that that it was America should be ashamed of themselves, and so on. So the opposite is true when you look at this. And so this is important. No matter how you feel about Bill Cosby, upholding the principles of fair trials is so much more important. And they don't understand. Like, I mean, we also hear all this stuff, and, you know, and it's true. The percentage of incarcerated people are Black Americans.
Yeah,
if you don't uphold the system...
yeah, I agree. But this is not about being in the United States.
Well, without getting into the whole race issue, and you know...
Because there's an over-incarceration in the United States and Canada for people of black color and others, and that's for a whole host of reasons that we're not covering right now. But this is important. And
the principles of the justice system are the important
of the justice system are very important. And this appeal resonates also in Canada for another discussion that they had. But go ahead.
Right. Okay. So there's two main reasons why the not only was the conviction overturned, but they're prevented from trying him again.
Correct.
So. And this is an interesting thing that people need to really, like, it would make so many great articles to discuss, like, the details, you know, of how this went down. But at the time that Constand originally came forward, the complainant who didn't want her name publication banned, she made a complaint, and she was suing him civilly.
Suing him. Asking for money. Damages for sexual assault. And
then it was also brought to the attention, because she's from Canada, and she complained in Canada, and they brought it to the criminal, you know, attention down in the States.
Because it occurred in the U.S.
So the prosecutor, at the time, Bruce Castor, he looked at the case, and he had to do what every prosecutor has to do, make a reasonable prospect of conviction assessment. Right. And he felt for her. He did not think that there was a good chance of conviction on the burden of proof in a criminal trial, but he knew that she had a civil trial. And if Bill Cosby, and this is the important thing, if Bill Cosby was at risk of being criminally prosecuted, he could plead the fifth and not give a deposition.
Explain that.
Okay.
Because people might not get that.
Yeah. So, and we don't have the fifth in Canada, right? But, you know.
We have a right to silence.
You have a right to silence.
Same thing.
So in the civil suit, you have to give evidence.
Pause. The right to the fifth is to not make a statement so you don't incriminate yourself.
Right, yeah. Actually, I just...
Dramatic pose.
I just remembered Grace this week saying, oh, on your next podcast, you should do the whole, just shut the up.
That's a funny video, yeah.
Yeah,
if they want to take a statement from you, just shut the up. Anyways, it's funny.
But
it's true.
Good advice.
It is, because giving a statement doesn't help you.
No, it doesn't.
Not at the investigative stage.
Because you don't know what you're actually accused of at that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Bill Cosby was faced with a civil action. So he was sued for damages for sexual assault. Okay?
And in civil court, you have a balance of probabilities.
It's a lower threshold, and then you don't have a decision whether you testify or not. They can order you to give a deposition in the United States. But you can claim protection.
I'll give you a drop.
Just squeeze it. You can claim protection. So in this case, prior to testifying in the civil case, there was an inquiry with the prosecutor in the U.S. because of his criminal liability. Over to you.
So he was trying to figure out, you know, what's best for this complainant. Oh,
I'm just kidding.
Pour some into you.
No, it's okay. Just kidding.
I was just like, I'm going to take this before you do. Okay.
By the way, we're having a really good Crown Royal Black tonight, although they're not a sponsor.
No, but it was a gift.
It was a gift.
Oh, maybe. No, I thought it was from somebody else. Anyways,
From me.
we won't worry about that story.
It's a gift from my wife.
Yeah. Okay, but okay, so we're getting into this is the important details of the Cosby thing that people really need to understand clearly is that the prosecutor was being as responsible as he could.
Right. Take it slow and explain it, because this is a good case.
He wanted to help the complainant, and he knew that if Cosby could face criminal charges, that he couldn't be forced to give testimony under oath in the civil suit.
In the United States.
Because he could plead the fifth. And so if he had a guarantee from the prosecutor that he wouldn't be prosecuted for any complaints related to this particular person, then he was not, the Fifth Amendment was not available to him.
Correct.
In the civil suit. So the prosecutor did what he did, not out of any sort of like, you know, favors or fandom or, you know, corruption or anything like that. He literally made a decision and committed himself to it in order to remove one of Bill Cosby's rights from him.
Right.
Which he would have had if he was facing a criminal trial. So then it gets worse. Because now he's been stripped of his Fifth Amendment rights in the civil suit, and he ends up coming up with a multi-million-dollar settlement as a result.
Right, so take this slow. So he gives evidence.
For depositions under oath.
For a deposition under oath in the civil case, whether you agree with his evidence or not, and then reaches a multi-million-dollar settlement. A multi-million-dollar settlement. Okay?
And
it's
also,
not as if the complainant went to the police and wanted him charged. She sued him first. And got a multi-million-dollar settlement.
Which I believe originally had some sort of an agreement that she would pursue criminal charges.
She would or not?
That she would not. It's my understanding.
Right, because
I'm
you
not
can do that in the U.S.
sure on that. But
I'm not going to... We're not going to give an opinion on that. But in the U.S., you can... There's similarities in Canada, but you can reach a settlement on a with or without prejudice basis without making an admission about criminal or civil liability. That's fine. Multi-million-dollar settlement. Done. Okay? Pause on this. Okay? Sued. Lots of money. Allegations of sexual assault. He testifies in the proceedings.
To testify because he couldn't plead the fifth.
Got an assurance from the prosecutor. Immunity. they won't prosecute him as a result of his deposition, then settles for a lot of money. A lot of money. Money that you and I and we would really be happy with. Money that we will never see in our lifetime. Settled. Then what happens?
So then the next, that prosecutor, moves on or retires or whatever. I can't remember.
Retires or, whatever.
And the next one comes in and sees some political opportunity or for maybe a proper reason. Maybe for a proper reason.
Me Too movement happens. Okay? Mm-hmm. And here's a poster boy for the Me Too movement. Bill Cosby.
And they say, you know what?
Weinstein.
We're going to reopen this investigation. And
correct.
As soon as there's wind of that, then Bruce Castor contacts them and said, no, you can't do that. I made a public statement. I made a guarantee. This was done for a purpose.
A guarantee for immunity from prosecution.
And and they say, well, that was you, and you don't have the ability to do that. And so I believe, and I don't think I'm wrong on this, that there was an election going on at the time as well, because they elect their prosecutors, their district attorneys, and so on. And so there was a campaign basically saying, appoint me district attorney, and I'll prosecute Bill Cosby. There was so much politics going on that side, and they did not.
Thank God, in Canada, we don't do that. Yeah. We don't elect crown attorneys or elect judges. Yeah. Because we'd be in this country if that was what the case was.
And look at the power of the media to control the legal system too.
But just imagine.
When there's elections.
But what's the worst combination? This is why I have such disdain for the U.S. justice system. You elect judges. You elect the head prosecutor. Mm-hmm. Right. Everything's tried in the media. You're accused of a crime. Let's litigate it in the media way before we get to trial.
Yeah. I have so many U.S.
It's insane.
I have so many U.S. fans who constantly say Canada sucks and you should move to the States and all this other stuff. So I love this stuff. Pointing out the
I was involved in 2 criminal proceedings in the U.S. Like the 88-year-old judge who presided was asleep half the time.
You were the lawyer. Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah. I know only.
So this is the important thing to understand. So. The second part of the violation of his rights, because he lost his, well, it's not a violation if they were to honor, what they did, then it's just a normal civil suit, right? But then not only did they strip him of his Fifth Amendment right in the civil suit, which resulted in a over $3 million settlement, and my understanding is there's a dispute over what it was he said in his depositions too, that there wasn't actually confession. I don't know what he said or what he didn't.
Whether he lied or he didn't lie or he gave half. That's not our job.
When they reneged on that deal and then took him to trial, they then
sought
the new prosecutors.
How many years later?
10. It was
like a decade later.
Yeah, so it was over a decade later.
Yeah.
And they actually got permission from the judge, to use his deposition in the criminal trial.
So here's the thing
now
that
he's
happened.
been forced out of his right to silence.
When prosecuted later on, over a decade later, the prosecution said, we're not bound by the agreement of that former attorney. Mm-hmm. Okay?
That wasn't within his rights to do that.
And we're going to prosecute him. And on a motion to suppress, as they call it in the United States, I find that kind of cool. Motion to suppress. I like that. It's kind of sexy. Suppress the deposition.
Think about that one.
Deposition transcripts. They were allowed to use it. So there was a confession to a large extent.
So they violated his right to silence in the first trial, and they violated his right to silence in the criminal trial, which is the criminal trial, obviously much more serious.
Yeah. And then they call several other complainants where there are no charges laid to testify that he's a f***ing rapist. So it's character assassination. And guys, please, girls, everybody, and everybody in between, it's not that we're making a decision whether...
in between.
Did I do that wrong?
No, you did it perfectly. That's why I'm laughing.
I may be imperfect in the way I say, I just love everybody.
But
the reality is, however you feel about Bill Cosby, I don't give a shit. What I care about is the legal process and fairness. That's what I care about. So here's the issue. A violation of the immunity agreement, and then calling witnesses, and Diana, I want you to talk about this. because I know you're passionate about this, and I can give you the legalese on it, but calling a number of witnesses who were all allegedly sexually assaulted, raped by Bill Cosby as witnesses at the trial for propensity evidence. And I need you to talk about that, and then I'll probably explode, but go ahead.
So, well, the bad character evidence has been an issue in Canada recently as well, that it's sort of had a mission creep, right? Where that normally you're not allowed to bring in, evidence that somebody is the type of person who would commit a crime. It has to be
propensity evidence. So just to put it in legal terms, for those of you who might be of a legal background, in Canada you can call similar fact evidence. Evidence that would distinguish a pattern of conduct that is so similar and strikingly similar that it would lead you to conclude that the act was done. But it has to go to identity and other certain relevance. You can't just call it at large. You can't do it just to say that the person is a bad person or lead you to what's called propensity. In other words, that they are likely to have committed the offense because 7 other people testified that they were sexually assaulted. That's not allowed. But in the United States, that's exactly what the happened. Well, and in Canada, it's been an issue.
In Canada, they're actually recognizing what's happening and they're cutting back on it. But to make it worse, like you kind of think, well, if you got a record, there's going to be some bad character evidence coming in if you're charged with a similar act, right? So one of the interesting things, though, is like if you have a record, if you have a record, then you expect that might play a role in your prosecution for any similar type of things that you've already been convicted for. But what we're talking about bad character evidence are unproven, prior bad acts.
Right. So
these are alleged
people have said that you allegedly did, but it's never been proven in court.
You've never been convicted of it.
I'm trying to break that down to simple terms. You're alleged to have done, but it's never been proven in court.
Mm-hmm. So and be like, oh, he used to beat me all the time. It was like, when was that? It was all the time, It was like, there's no way to disprove that. There's no time frame given for you to say, no, I was in Florida that day. You know what I mean?
Right. So they called a number of complainants in the Bill Cosby case.
What was that? I was like, I'm on the phone. I was in Florida.
I would have been in Nassau or somewhere else.
I know, Bahamas. I've never been there.
It's good.
Yeah.
A lot of sharks.
No, this is really important because it's allowed. It's still in Canada. They actually get away with bringing in alleged prior bad acts that are uncharged and unproven in order to establish, and this is the reason they give, to explain away why it is she didn't leave him, right? Because she is some sort of a battered woman or whatever, right? And so they're trying to say, well, the reason that she didn't leave or the reason she didn't act in a way that you would have expected her to is because this is the common behavior and these are the other alleged things that happened. But they're still unproven and you're not charged with them. So if you want to defend yourself against those accusations, this isn't subject matter of the charge. Like, I know I'm getting technical in my language now. It's like,
no, but so to break it down, so let's say
we have to bring
in Bill Cosby, there's a number of people who said they were raped by Bill Cosby. And they testified as to that experience. So, in essence, what you're doing is you're defending the charge that you're faced with and all those other accusations. And the same can happen in Canada if there's a legitimate purpose. And we're not saying there isn't, but it has to meet that evidentiary threshold. So, in his case, a lot of witnesses were called that essentially testified to his bad character. And the Court of Appeal said 2 things. One, the agreement with the prosecutor where he was granted immunity must stand. You can't change that. That was the basis of their judgment.
And that's important for all Americans.
Right. And there's a very good reason for that. We have to rely upon these agreements with prosecutors for a whole host of reasons, whether in Canada or the United States.
The most powerful people in the justice system, a prosecutor. They decide who to charge, who to prosecute, how they're going to do it.
But this is how we do business, and it's very important. So these agreements must be honored. So that was the pivotal point in the appeal for Bill Cosby, and I agree with that. Regardless of how anybody feels about Bill Cosby or what he did or didn't do, I don't care.
And whether or not a lot of people had sex on Quaaludes back in the time.
Right. The reality is that agreement was in place, and it must stand, and it has to be honored. That is something that was correct for the Court of Appeal to decide on. Then they made a cautionary comment about calling witnesses with unproven allegations where it is essentially character assassination without evidence to establish something more that's relevant to the case at hand.
And why did they only let one testify in the first trial, which was a mistrial, and then decided, oh, let's let 4 or 5 of them go this time? I can't remember.
Right.
I think it was
and you
4.
can see this in other cases where, you have somebody who may be notorious for this type of offense, and you have protests, and you have a number of witnesses testifying. The problem is you really pervert the justice process. And one complainant giving evidence about what happened to them is enough. Don't f*** up the system.
Well, they're not on trial, for having done something to somebody else. The only
They're not on trial for
by
those
allowing
things.
somebody to testify. Oh, I'm saying he did this to me too. It's like, but you don't have to decide if I'm telling the truth because that's not one of the charges. All you can take from that is like she's being allowed to testify because apparently he did it.
Right.
But this is the other problem too.
And then, but then how do you deal with that? So just
when the media publishes a story, and let's take Bill Cosby out of the equation for a moment because he's got over 60 accusers or something like that, right? But and this started back in 2005, whatever the date was on the original charge. But when the media publishes that somebody's accused of doing something, gets an exclusive interview with a complainant, and they give details of the accusation, if that person actually did the same thing to somebody else, the media has now destroyed the ability for another person to come forward and be credible because their details mesh. Matching details of something you read in the f***ing news is not
so
unique.
Glad you swore. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Right, that's a great
Solidarity.
point. No, but that's a great point.
I don't know why prosecutors aren't trying to explain to the media and to complainants. If you give the details of your allegation to the media, you reduce our ability to prove similar fact, or should.
So what we're talking about here is maintaining integrity of a process. Yeah. And we see too many false accusations.
With this, we got one drop. Got one drop left.
Good night. Until next time.
My best friend.
Maybe you like me, maybe you hate me. I don't give a shit.
Okay.